Today we're discussing how to win over investors and donors for your independent film. In the last video I made, we covered 8 ways that you can get your film funded, and if you missed that, you can check it out somewhere here. Locking in funds for a movie is no easy task, no matter how experienced you are in this industry. People are, rightfully so, skeptical and risk averse, but films are getting funded every day, so with the right strategy, a great script, and some good old hustling, you can get it done. A wise old friend once said to me that persistence was the key to success. The longer I'm in this industry, the more I find this to be true. But let's talk shop. You have a great finished script and are now looking for investors or donors to help you actualize the project. As with the last video I made, we can't get into every tip and trick in the book here, but I'll do my best to make sure that you understand the fundamentals of what it takes, and I hope that you can get creative with it and fill in the blanks. I'll begin by pointing out, in my opinion, the most important things to consider for A, finding investors, B, piquing an investor or donor's interest, and C, convincing them to back your project. So A, finding investors. What good is knowing about film funding if you don't know where to find investors? Again, I can't cover everything here, but you may be surprised as to how straightforward the majority of the industry actually works. There's no magic pill here. The simple answer is that investors are all around you, hiding in plain sight. Some know they're investors, and some may not even know it yet, and they're just waiting for you to come along with your movie and persuade them to actually start investing. As we covered in the last video, there are different kinds of investors, but largely we'll break them down into 2 categories this time. 1, institutional. This category represents official institutions that are in the business of investing and issuing grants or tax credits, banks, investment groups, governments, nonprofits, etc. These companies are publicly accessible and can be found almost everywhere and can be communicated with relatively easily by doing Google searches or digging into resources such as IMDb Pro. In general, institutional investments, grants, tax incentives, credits are more regulated by the government and have strict, often quite extensive criteria that must be met by the filmmaker in order to qualify for funding. And 2, private or alternative investment. This category essentially contains everyone who isn't a regulated, proper financial institution, investment group, government agency, or nonprofit that issues loans and grants to filmmakers. It's the real estate's equivalent of creative financing. This could be wealthy individuals, family offices, local businesses, and more, of course. And the reason many filmmakers, especially up-and-coming ones, pursue these kinds of alternative financiers and donors is because qualifying for institutional investments may not be possible or even desirable for the filmmaker raising the money due to a lack of track record or assets to put up as collateral against the funding. Alternative or private investors and donors are even more abundant than institutions, but they can often be harder to connect with or convince than expected maybe initially. Now, I'm leaving out studio funding because that essentially, if Warner Brothers is deciding to make a film and figure out how they're going to get the money to back a movie, we don't count that because it's not independent. And there are a lot of independent producers who produce films with studios, but they are then effectively hired by the studio to create the film and operate a little bit more like, I guess, a salaried employee for that project. And then, of course, studio executives are actually hired by the studios, and so they have their film budget to work with, or their companies, their studios, overall film budget to work with, and the process is just totally different. So what I'm talking about here is individuals, independent producers who want to retain ownership and control over their project and not work through a studio system. So the takeaway here is that the issue may not be finding the people and businesses who could invest in or donate to your film. The issue is actually how to convince said people to give your project the time of day, and that requires that you pique their interest. So let's talk about that, piquing interest. Let's say you found potential investors or donors either by researching, asking around, or attending galas or events where wealthy individuals congregate. What do you do or say to them to get them to even take interest in you and your project? I mean, it's got to be easy for Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino to raise money for their films, right? But what are you supposed to do? Well, first off, don't fool yourself into believing that it's that much easier for the top Hollywood filmmakers to get a film financed. It's actually not. And they're asking for a lot more money then you will as well. So the risk is still very high, no matter how much clout and success you have. And it's very difficult to do, and every movie is a bit of a miracle. So, Scorsese, for example, really struggled to get The Irishman made or financed. There's lots of stories of films that almost didn't see the light of day, from The Hurt Locker to Hitchcock's Psycho. The difference between Hitchcock having to convince Paramount to help him make Psycho and you convincing a local dentist or your church community is not that different. So, how do you pique an investor's interest? Whether institutional or alternative, these principles apply. Some may apply more to others, but you should keep all of these in mind when approaching your strategy. 1. Mission vision alignment. Not all donors and investors are interested in the same things. The genre, the style, the script itself plays a role in your success with investors. You should not approach individuals just because they invest in films, have a lot of money, or donate a lot. You need to understand what they normally invest in, what they contribute to, and why. If a local bank has had some success lending to a semi-established filmmaker who's developed a proven track record of making low-budget horror films for $200,000 and then successfully selling them to a distribution company or a channel at some kind of a profit, they'll likely not jump at a coming-of-age story by a filmmaker who only has one rom-com short film that received some attention at a small festival. This would not be the right investor for you, or if you're going to come in there, you better have a better strategy that's comparable to what they're used to and that they can identify with. And you've had to work, you would have to work so hard to convince them that you'd be a good fit that it's almost not worth it. And they would just see you as a huge risk, as opposed to, oh, well, we've had luck with horror films. This is kind of the budget. This is kind of what we've seen happen. So if you went in and you compared and you said, look, they do horror films, we also do horror films, but this is how we're a bit different. And, you'd have to sort of mission vision align yourself with them so that they can see where you're going and have a reasonable a reason to believe you and invest in you. On the other hand, the same relatively inexperienced filmmaker may leverage their small festival film success that they had to pique the interest of a local children's clothing store owner who's got a love for filmmaking and maybe always wanted to be a part of it, and doesn't have millions and millions of dollars to put into things, but maybe is willing to invest $50,000 to make your movie simply because the script resonates with her for a personal reason. Or, for example, you may have a script where your main character overcomes a rare disease or socioeconomic struggle, and then reaching out, of course, to organizations and people who donate to or support or feel strongly about said situations or conditions would, of course, lead to enthusiastic supporters and pique interest a lot more effectively than just approaching anyone and everyone with the old, I'm looking for investors for my film. It's a great story and I know it'll do well. Everyone says that, and frankly, this approach just doesn't work, period. So don't do it. To pique interest in donors or investors, you really need to know what your film really, at its core, is about. And then find people who care enough about that topic, theme, etc., to even listen to your idea and pitch. And if it's a more financial thing, then you better know the numbers behind the type of film you're doing, why it's going to work when you do it, what made films work in the past that are similar to this, and why yours is going to work as well, if it's like a conventional loan or something like that. But just piquing interest isn't enough, right? Now, you have to get the money from them too, and actually have them invest or donate to you. So C, convincing them to back the project. Once you've piqued the interest in the project by the investor or donor, you need to mitigate the risk and position yourself or your film actually as the best immediate investment or donation for them at the time. Now, not all investors care if the film will make money necessarily, especially donors, but the investor is driven by a lot of investors are driven by numbers, and so take that into account. And if they're not just focused on the numbers, they still have to feel strongly about the importance of the message that your film sends. And then, of course, they want to know that you're also credible and you're actually going to do a good job with it. So there are a number of checks that you need to tick off before anyone will even consider writing you a significant check, whether it's a donation or an investment. Many filmmakers want to know kind of a template or an ideal structure for a pitch deck, a trailer, or tell me what to say to convince them to donate. These are tools that people use. And the thing is, though pitch decks and trailers can help, I've seen plenty of movies get made just based on the script, based on a good verbal pitch, even. I've seen films selling without even the donors or the investors reading the script, especially in the documentary world that happens. So rather than dissecting the tools and what do you do on a pitch deck, let's focus on the fundamental, like essentials that are core to persuading anyone to invest or donate into your project or contribute in any way. This goes for actors and anybody that you want on board as well, by the way. However you pitch your film or put your pitch together, in that pitch, you need to absolutely convince the investors or donors of the following three things. One, what makes this film unique and good? Everything's been done before, but we have a saying in Hollywood, and it's give us the same but different. The film must seem familiar enough that a non-creative person can compare it to something successful that they've seen, but there needs to be a defining differentiator that lets them also say, oh, but it's different because XYZ. For example, Act of Valor was a straightforward film we've seen a million times. The Special Forces SEAL team has to rescue a CIA operative and thwart a terrorist plot. Nothing new there. But the producers behind the film had a lot of experience shooting commercials for the military and differentiated the film by saying it's going to be the most realistic, authentic action film in history because all the actors will be actual Navy SEALs, which has never been done before. 2. Why are you and your team the right person or people to tell this specific story? There's a saying in the industry that gets thrown at young writers a lot when they say or wonder how to break into the industry or make a name for themselves. Write what you know. This simple sentence is important for anyone in the business because it illustrates the importance of authenticity in the fictional stories that we write. As producers or directors, writers, actors, etc., you'll always be a lot better at portraying and supporting stories that you personally feel reflect a part of your true being. A single man with no children will have a much harder time telling a story about a family Christmas vacation gone wrong than a father of four who's had a few such experiences. Or a white 25-year-old college student will have trouble convincing an investor that her script about the struggles of an illegally immigrated Mexican family trying to get their U.S. citizenship in Mexicali would be one to put their money into. And going back to the Act of Valor things, these people, the producers behind it, had experience with the military. Some were soldiers, and they've worked with real soldiers before. They knew they could pull it off, so they had something there that made the sale easier, gave it a hook. It's a simple question of authenticity and credibility. When people understand a topic, genre, or subject matter really well, they have a clear perspective. And having a perspective or opinion informs a film with nuances that create points of interest, conversation, realism, and truth in the film after people watch it, which then resonates, of course, with audiences and ultimately helps a film succeed. So it's important. And then the third question is, why is it important or relevant today? Now, the zeitgeist drives trends. This doesn't mean you should follow trends and make a film that plays into what's hot. It just means that you need to explain how your project will fit into today's world, climate, and overall pop culture. Timing is a massive driver for success with films, and big studios release their films specifically with timing in mind. A holiday film coming out, Christmas film coming out in July is a silly release, and it would flop. Now that's a bit of an on-the-nose example, but hopefully it illustrates the idea behind it. The more urgency you can put on your film's need to be produced now, the quicker you'll get your film funded. So if you have a script about your grandmother's story and how she struggled to pay her bills after immigrating to the U.S. as a single mother and then decided to start buying and selling furniture to eventually become Furniture Mart, a company purchased by Warren Buffett for millions of dollars years later, you may wonder how you would go about pitching that today for the like one why now situation because it's an old story. So you'd want to dig into the heart and soul of this film. It's about overcoming hardship, female entrepreneurship, independence, immigration, capitalism, business success, rags to riches, and a lot more. But as I write this right now, women's rights and equal pay are a hot topic. And post pandemic, most people are searching for freedom and independence, more so than ever before, I believe. And people want to be inspired and given the courage to try becoming their own boss. So, an argument could be made or formulated out of these data points that women who drive film's success, oftentimes because a man will go to see a film with his wife or girlfriend if she wants to go, are currently experiencing an entrepreneurial revolution. And this film would serve as a catalyst and inspiration to help drive this movement even more. To conclude this very incomplete but hopefully still valuable video here, I do want to end with just a few little key points here and tips that you can walk away and just sum this all up again real quick. Getting your film funded is not a straightforward process. It requires that you create a strategy that makes sense for your specific project. It also benefits you to stick to a lane once you have a little bit of a strategy and create a series of relatively similar projects back to back rather than trying to make all kinds of different movies. Think of Tyler Perry, Clint Eastwood, Tom Cruise films. They're all similar and in a certain lane. And the reason is that once you've developed a system for funding, producing, and distributing films, it's much smarter to piggyback off of what's worked and who you did it with and who you did it for than to start all over and in a different direction for your next project. It'll confuse the audience. You'll have to start over with new people, find new mission, vision alignments, and do the whole thing all over again. In the next video, we'll delve into a little bit more insights about how to get your film done on the distribution end maybe. I'm not exactly sure what it's going to be about yet, but for now, I hope this was helpful. Feel free to post a comment or figure out how to reach out to me if you have any more questions or would like to learn more about topics like this. Give me ideas, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I can create a video for a suggestion that you submit sometime soon. Take care.